The rain pelted down mercilessly on Katherine Ellison's tear-stained face as she stood alone on the wooden platform of the Madisonville Depot in Texas, 1876. The station master had just delivered the devastating news that the family who had promised her a position as a governess had changed their minds, leaving her stranded with nowhere to go, no money to return east, and night rapidly approaching. Her sodden trunk sat beside her, containing everything she owned in the world, which wasn't much. The last passenger wagon had departed, and the few remaining travelers hurried past, eager to escape the downpour, avoiding eye contact with the desperate young woman. "Looks like you could use some help, madam," came a deep, gentle voice from behind her. Katherine turned, wiping futilely at her wet cheeks, and found herself looking up at a tall man holding a large black umbrella. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out kind eyes and a strong jawline softened by the hint of a compassionate smile. He wore a long duster coat and had the unmistakable bearing of a cowboy. "Come in," he said, extending the umbrella to shelter her from the rain. "No sense in both of us getting soaked." "Thank you," Katherine replied hesitantly, stepping beneath the offered protection. Up close, she could see that he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps only a few years older than her own 22 years. "But I'm afraid I'm quite stranded. The Barnett family was supposed to meet me, but apparently they've hired someone else." The cowboy's expression darkened momentarily. "The Barnetts? That doesn't surprise me much. They've got a reputation for changing their minds when it suits them." He touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Isaac Adams, madam. I run the Double Ranch about 5 miles outside of town." "Katherine Ellison," she replied, extending a gloved hand that was damp despite her best efforts. "I've come all the way from Boston." Isaac's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a journey to make alone." "I had little choice," Katherine said, trying to keep her voice steady. "After my parents passed last winter, there wasn't much left for me there." Isaac nodded thoughtfully, then gestured toward her trunk. "Well, Miss Ellison, I can't leave a lady stranded in the rain. My sister runs a boarding house in town. She always has room for decent folk who need a place to stay while they figure things out." Katherine bit her lip, embarrassed. "That's very kind, Mr. Adams, but I'm afraid I have very little money left after my journey." "Sarah doesn't turn away people in need," Isaac replied firmly. He glanced around the nearly deserted platform. "My wagon's just over there. Let me help you with your trunk and we'll get you somewhere dry." Katherine hesitated only briefly before nodding. What choice did she have? The rain showed no signs of letting up and night was falling. "Thank you, Mr. Adams. Your kindness is unexpected." Isaac lifted her trunk effortlessly and carried it toward a sturdy wagon at the edge of the depot. "Folks out here have to look out for each other, Miss Ellison. The West isn't forgiving to those who go it alone." As Katherine followed him, sheltered by his umbrella, she couldn't help but wonder if perhaps fate had been kind after all. The rejection that had seemed so devastating moments ago might just be the beginning of something entirely unexpected. Isaac helped Katherine into the wagon, making sure she was settled comfortably before securing her trunk in the back. He climbed up beside her and handed her the umbrella to hold while he took the reins. The horses snorted impatiently, eager to be out of the rain. "It's not far to Sarah's place," he assured her as the wagon lurched forward. "The Golden Rose boarding house is the finest in Madisonville, though my sister would blush to hear me say so." Katherine clutched the umbrella tightly, watching the rain-soaked buildings of the small town pass by. Madisonville wasn't large by Eastern standards, but it had a certain frontier charm, a main street lined with wooden buildings, their facades decorated with varying degrees of ambition. from the plain functionality of the general store to the ornate pillars of what appeared to be the town bank. "How long have you been in Texas, Mr. Adams?" she asked, trying to make conversation over the drumming rain. "Born and raised," he replied, skillfully guiding the horses through a particularly muddy section of road. "My pa came here in '45, before Texas was even part of the Union. Built the double from nothing." A note of pride colored his voice. "He passed 5 years ago, and I've been running it since." "I'm sorry for your loss," Katherine said softly. Isaac nodded his thanks. "What about you, Miss Ellison? What brought you all the way from Boston to become a governess for the likes of the Barnetts?" Katherine sighed, watching raindrops slide down the umbrella's edge. "I was a teacher's assistant at a ladies' academy. When my parents died, influenza took them both within a week of each other. I lost our home as well. There wasn't much demand for another teacher in Boston, but I saw an advertisement for a governess position out west. The wages seemed generous and—" She trailed off. "And you wanted a fresh start," Isaac finished for her. "Yes," she admitted. "Somewhere no one knew me as poor Katherine Ellison, the orphan spinster." Isaac chuckled. "Well, at 22, I'd hardly call you a spinster, Miss Ellison." Katherine felt her cheeks warm despite the chill of the rain. "In Boston, I might as well have been. Most of my former students are already married with children." "Things move at a different pace out here," Isaac replied. "Folks tend to focus on survival before society's expectations." The wagon turned down a side street and pulled up before a 3-story clapboard building painted a cheerful yellow despite the gray weather. A wooden sign swung in the wind, depicting a golden rose. "Here we are," Isaac announced, setting the brake. "Wait here while I tell Sarah we've got a guest." Before Katherine could respond, he jumped down from the wagon and dashed through the rain to the front door. Through the large front window, she could see him speaking animatedly to a woman with the same strong jawline and dark hair, gesturing back toward the wagon. The woman, presumably Sarah, looked past him toward Katherine, her expression quickly shifting from curiosity to concern. Moments later, Isaac returned with an umbrella for each of them. "Sarah's got a room ready for you. She says you're to come in straight away and get warm by the fire before you catch your death." Katherine allowed herself to be helped down from the wagon, grateful for Isaac's steady hand as her feet squelched in the mud. "You're both very kind." "Nonsense," Isaac replied, retrieving her trunk. "Just doing what anyone would do." But as Katherine followed him toward the welcoming light of the golden rose, she knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would help a stranded stranger. Not everyone would offer shelter and kindness with no expectation of return. Perhaps the West wasn't quite as wild and unforgiving as she'd been led to believe. The warmth that greeted Katherine as she stepped into the Golden Rose boarding house was both physical and emotional. A fire crackled merrily in a large stone hearth, and the entryway smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. Sarah Adams rushed forward, taking Katherine's wet coat and umbrella. "You poor thing. You're soaked through," Sarah exclaimed, her voice a slightly higher pitch than her brother's but with the same warm cadence. "Come, sit by the fire. I'll fetch you some tea and something dry to wear." "Thank you, but I couldn't impose," Katherine began. "Nonsense," Sarah interrupted. "Isaac explained your situation. You'll stay here tonight at the very least, and tomorrow we'll sort out what comes next." Isaac set Katherine's trunk down by the stairs. "Sarah's not one to take no for an answer when she's in a mothering mood," he said with affection. "Someone has to look after this town's strays," Sarah replied, giving her brother a pointed look. "Speaking of which, you're dripping all over my clean floor, Isaac." He laughed, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. "I'll just help Miss Ellison get settled, then head back to the ranch." In this weather, I think not, Sarah said firmly. The creek will be up with this rain. You'll stay in your usual room and head back in the morning. Katherine watched this exchange with interest. The siblings had a comfortable, teasing rapport that reminded her painfully of what she'd lost with her parents' passing. There had been no siblings in her life, no extended family to turn to in her grief. Sarah ushered her toward the fire, settling her in a comfortable armchair. "Isaac, go fetch Miss Ellison's trunk up to the blue room while I get her something warm to drink." As Isaac carried her belongings upstairs, Katherine took in her surroundings. The Golden Roses common room was tastefully decorated with comfortable furniture arranged in conversational groupings. A piano stood in one corner and bookshelves lined one wall. It was far more refined than she had expected to find in a frontier town. "Your boarding house is lovely," Katherine told Sarah when she returned with a steaming cup of tea. "Thank you," Sarah replied, sitting in the chair opposite. "I try to make it a real home for people. Some stay just a night, others for months." She studied Katherine with kind eyes so similar to her brother's. "Now, Isaac tells me you came to be a governess for the Barnetts," Katherine nodded, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm cup. "Yes, but apparently they've made other arrangements." Sarah's lips thinned. "Eugenia Barnett changes her mind more often than she changes her hat. I'm sorry you came all this way for nothing, but perhaps it's for the best. She's gone through 3 governesses in the past year." "Oh," Katherine said, deflated. "I didn't realize." "Don't worry," Sarah said quickly. "Madisonville might be small, but there are opportunities for an educated woman. The town's growing and many families value learning." She paused. "Can you tell me a bit about your experience?" By the time Isaac returned downstairs, Katherine had shared her background at the Boston Ladies Academy and her 4 years of teaching experience. Sarah listened intently, occasionally asking thoughtful questions. "Well," Sarah said finally, "I believe you might be exactly what our town needs. We've been without a proper schoolteacher since Miss Winters married last spring and moved to Austin. The town council has been trying to find a replacement, but qualified teachers aren't exactly plentiful in these parts." Katherine straightened in her chair. "Are you suggesting that you might apply for the position?" "Absolutely," Sarah confirmed. "The salary isn't grand, but it includes a small house behind the schoolhouse and would give you independence." "I would need to meet with this town council," Katherine said cautiously. "Mayor Thompson heads it," Isaac said, rejoining them. "He's fair-minded and progressive about education, especially for a cattle town. I could introduce you tomorrow." Hope blossomed in Katherine's chest for the first time since arriving in Madisonville. "I would be most grateful." Sarah stood. "That's settled then. Now let me show you to your room so you can change into something dry. I've laid out a nightgown and robe you can borrow. They might be a bit large, but they're clean and warm." Katherine followed Sarah up the stairs, glancing back to see Isaac watching her with an unreadable expression. When their eyes met, he quickly looked away, but not before she caught a glimpse of something interest. Perhaps that sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. The blue room, as Sarah called it, was simply but comfortably furnished with a brass bed, a small writing desk, a wardrobe, and a washstand. A window looked out over the main street of Madisonville, though little could be seen through the rain-streaked glass in the gathering darkness. "The bathroom is at the end of the hall," Sarah explained. "We have indoor plumbing. Isaac insisted when we renovated last year, said it would give us an edge over the hotel." "He seems very supportive of your business," Katherine observed. Sarah smiled fondly. "Isaac has always looked out for me, especially since my husband died. Martin was a cavalry officer, took a Comanche arrow 6 years ago." She touched a locket at her throat. "Isaac made sure I didn't lose the boarding house, even though times were tight at the ranch too. "I'm sorry for your loss," Katherine said, the words inadequate but heartfelt. "Thank you," Sarah replied. "It was hard, but life goes on. The boarding house keeps me busy and I have good friends in town." She patted Katherine's hand. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a new beginning." After Sarah left, Katherine changed into the borrowed nightgown and hung her damp clothes near the small fireplace to dry. She unpacked a few essentials from her trunk, including a framed daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. Setting it on the bedside table, she touched their faces gently. "I hope I'm making you proud," she whispered. Despite her exhaustion, Katherine found sleep elusive. The rain continued to drum against the windowpane, and occasional rumbles of thunder punctuated the night. Eventually, thirst drove her from her bed. Wrapping the borrowed robe tightly around herself, she quietly opened her door and padded down the hallway toward the stairs, intending to find the kitchen. As she descended, she noticed a faint light coming from the common room. Thinking Sarah might still be up, she headed toward it, only to find Isaac sitting alone by the dying fire, a book open in his hands. He looked up at her soft footsteps, surprise evident in his expression. "Miss Ellison, I hope I didn't disturb you." "Not at all," she assured him. "I was just looking for some water." Isaac rose immediately. "The kitchen's through here. Let me show you." He led her through a door at the rear of the common room into a large, well-appointed kitchen. Taking a clean glass from a cupboard, he filled it from a pitcher. "Thank you," Katherine said, accepting the water. "Do you often stay up reading so late?" Isaac leaned against the counter, his tall frame relaxed but still somehow alert. "Ranch life starts before dawn and ends well after dusk. Late night is the only time I get to read for pleasure." Katherine glanced at the book he still held. "Thoreau, that's not what I would have expected." A smile tugged at his lips. "Let me guess you thought cowboys only read dime novels about outlaws and gunfights." "Perhaps," she admitted sheepishly. "My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father," Isaac explained. "She made sure both Sarah and I had a proper education, even out here. We grew up on Shakespeare and Austen as much as tracking and riding." Katherine sipped her water thoughtfully. "I've misjudged you, Mr. Adams." "I apologize for making assumptions." "No apology needed. Most people see the hat and boots and don't look much further." He studied her for a moment. "May I ask why you became a teacher?" "I've always loved learning," Katherine replied, "and helping others discover that same joy. There's nothing quite like seeing a student's face when understanding dawns." She smiled at a memory. "My father used to say I was teaching my dolls their letters before I properly knew them myself." Isaac nodded. "That's a calling, not just a profession. Madisonville would be lucky to have you." "If they'll have me," Katherine said, uncertainty creeping back in. "They will," Isaac assured her with such confidence that she almost believed him. "The town needs someone with passion for education, not just someone who sees it as a job." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder and the ticking of a clock in the common room. "I should let you get back to your reading," Katherine finally said, setting down her empty glass. "And I should try to sleep. Tomorrow sounds like it will be a significant day." "That it will," Isaac agreed. He hesitated, then added, "Whatever happens with the school position, Miss Ellison, I'm glad the Barnetts changed their minds." Katherine tilted her head questioningly. "If they hadn't," Isaac explained, a slight flush visible even in the dim kitchen, "you wouldn't have been standing in the rain and I wouldn't have had the chance to meet you." The simple honesty of his statement caught Katherine off guard. "Thank you, Mr. Adams." "Isaac, please," he said. "If you're going to be staying in Madisonville, we might as well dispense with formalities." "Then you must call me Katherine," she replied, Surprised by her own boldness, he smiled and something warm unfurled in her chest. "Good night, Katherine." "Good night, Isaac." As Katherine made her way back to her room, she found herself less bothered by the storm outside. For the first time since arriving in Texas, she felt as though things might work out after all. Morning arrived with surprising brightness, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Katherine dressed in her best remaining outfit, a navy blue skirt and jacket with a high-necked white blouse, and carefully pinned her honey-brown hair into a neat bun. Her appearance in the small mirror was satisfyingly professional, though she wished she had time to press the wrinkles from her travel. When she descended to the dining room, she found several other boarders already at breakfast. Sarah bustled over immediately, introducing her to the others. Mr. Phelps, an elderly accountant who handled the books for several businesses in town, the widow Carson, who lived at the Golden Rose year-round, and Mr. Turner, a land surveyor passing through on business. Isaac had to return to the ranch at first light, Sarah explained as she served Katherine a generous plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. One of his hands rode in to say a section of fence went down in the storm, but he'll be back by noon to take you to meet Mayor Thompson. Katherine tried to hide her disappointment. She'd been looking forward to seeing Isaac again, though she could hardly explain why, even to herself. They'd spoken only briefly, yet she felt a connection to the thoughtful cowboy that defied logic. "That's very kind of him," she replied, focusing on her breakfast, "but I wouldn't want to take him away from his responsibilities." Sarah waved a dismissive hand. "Isaac has capable men working for him. He delegates well." She lowered her voice. "Besides, he specifically said to tell you he'd be back, storm damage or not." Before Katherine could respond to this intriguing information, the front door opened, and a distinguished-looking gentleman entered, removing his hat to reveal silver-streaked dark hair. "Ah, Judge Blackwell," Sarah greeted him. "Coffee, please, Sarah," the man replied, then noticed Katherine. "Good morning, miss. You must be the stranded governess I've heard about." Katherine rose to shake his hand. "Katherine Ellison, sir. News travels quickly in Madisonville, it seems." The judge chuckled. "Small towns run on gossip like engines run on coal. Nothing malicious. Mind you, Sarah mentioned your situation when I stopped by last evening during the storm." "Judge Blackwell sits on the town council," Sarah explained, returning with coffee. "I took the liberty of mentioning your teaching experience." "Most fortuitous timing," the judge said, accepting the cup. "Our schoolhouse has been without a proper teacher for months. We've had temporary solutions, but the children deserve better." "I would be very interested in applying for the position," Katherine said carefully. "Excellent." The judge sipped his coffee. "I've already spoken with Mayor Thompson. He's agreed to convene the Education Committee this afternoon to meet with you." Katherine's eyes widened. "So quickly?" "We don't stand on ceremony here, Miss Ellison. The fall term begins in 3 weeks, and we need time to prepare if you're to take the position." "I understand," Katherine said, mind racing. "I would need to prepare as well, review your curriculum, understand the students' current progress." Judge Blackwell nodded approvingly. "That's precisely the attitude we need. The meeting will be at 2 o'clock at the town hall. I suggest you bring any letters of recommendation or credentials you might have." After the judge departed, Katherine spent the morning retrieving her references from her trunk and reviewing them carefully. Her former headmistress had written a glowing commendation, and she had similar letters from the parents of several students. She hoped they would be sufficient. As promised, Isaac returned shortly before noon. Katherine was in the common room organizing her papers when he entered, bringing with him the scent of sunshine and open spaces. "Good morning," he greeted her, removing his hat. "Or nearly afternoon, I suppose." Sarah tells me you've already met Judge Blackwell. Katherine nodded, gathering her documents. Yes, and the Education Committee is meeting at 2. Things are moving much faster than I anticipated. That's the West for you, Isaac replied with a smile. Are you ready for lunch? Sarah's packed us a basket. I thought we might eat in the town square before your meeting. It would give you a chance to see more of Madisonville. The idea of a picnic with Isaac was unexpectedly appealing. That sounds lovely. They walked together down Main Street, Isaac pointing out various establishments, the general store owned by the Mayer family for 2 generations, the assayer's office where miners brought their finds from the hills to the west, the cattleman's bank where most ranchers did business, and finally, the newspaper office where the Madisonville Gazette was printed weekly. And there's the schoolhouse, Isaac said, indicating a neat white building at the edge of the town square. It was built 4 years ago after the original burned down. The town raised the money for a proper building with 2 classrooms, an office, and even a small library. Katherine studied the schoolhouse with interest. It looks well constructed. How many students attend? About 40, ranging from 6 to 16, Isaac replied. Some of the ranch children only come during winter months when farm work is lighter. That's quite a range of ages and abilities to manage, Katherine mused. Which is why we need a real teacher, Isaac said. The temporary arrangements haven't been ideal. They found a bench in the shade of a large oak tree in the town square. Isaac spread a checkered cloth and unpacked the basket Sarah had prepared. Fried chicken, cornbread, pickles, and apple tarts. As they ate, Katherine found conversation with Isaac surprisingly easy. He told her about his ranch, 5,000 acres with a herd of prime Hereford cattle that his father had introduced to the region. In turn, she shared stories of Boston and her teaching experiences. The hour passed quickly, and all too soon it was time to head to the town hall. Nervous? Isaac asked as they approached the imposing 2-story building. A little, Katherine admitted. It's been a whirlwind since I arrived. Isaac stopped, turning to face her. You'll do wonderfully. Just be yourself. That's who Madisonville needs. His confidence steadied her. Thank you, Isaac. For everything. I haven't done much, he demurred. You held an umbrella for a stranger in the rain, Katherine said softly. That was everything to me yesterday. Something passed between them then, a moment of connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. Isaac's expression softened, and for a heartbeat, Katherine thought he might say something more. Instead, he simply offered his arm. Shall we? The town hall meeting room was already occupied when they arrived. Mayor Thompson, a robust man with an impressive mustache, rose to greet them. Judge Blackwell was present, along with 3 others who were introduced as Mrs. Harper, the minister's wife, Mr. Collins, the bank manager, and Dr. Wilson, who served as the town physician. Miss Ellison, Mayor Thompson boomed, welcome to Madisonville. I understand you're interested in our teaching position. I am, sir, Katherine replied, keeping her voice steady despite her nerves. Adams, the mayor acknowledged Isaac with a nod. Didn't expect to see you here. Just doing my civic duty, Mayor, Isaac replied easily. Helping our potential new teacher get acquainted with the town. Katherine presented her references and answered the committee's questions about her experience and teaching philosophy. She explained her approach to managing students of different ages and abilities, her methods for maintaining discipline while encouraging curiosity, and her views on which subjects deserved most emphasis. I believe a strong foundation in reading, writing, and arithmetic is essential, she told them. But I also value history, science, and the arts. Children should understand both how the world works and why it matters. Judge Blackwell nodded approvingly. And how would you handle our more resistant students? Not all children see the value in education, particularly those who expect to work their family's land. I would help them understand that knowledge isn't just found in books, Katherine replied. Proper land management requires mathematics. Animal husbandry benefits from scientific understanding. Even the weather can be better predicted with the right knowledge. By the time the interview concluded, Katherine felt cautiously optimistic. The committee seemed impressed with her credentials and responses. "We'll need to discuss this privately," Mayor Thompson announced. "But I think I speak for everyone when I say we're very impressed, Miss Ellison." "Actually," Mrs. Harper interjected, "I wonder if we might expedite matters. The term begins soon, and if Miss Ellison is our choice, she'll need time to prepare." Dr. Wilson nodded. "I agree. I see no reason to delay a decision when we have a qualified candidate before us." The mayor looked around the table, receiving nods from each committee member. "Very well. Miss Ellison, we would like to offer you the position of schoolteacher for Madisonville, effective immediately. The salary is $40 per month, with the schoolhouse residence provided. The term runs from September through May, with breaks for Christmas and spring planting." Katherine could hardly believe how quickly everything was happening. Thank you, Mayor Thompson. I accept." "Excellent," the mayor proclaimed. "Mrs. Harper will help you get settled in the teacher's house and familiarize you with our curriculum such as it is. Mr. Collins will handle the paperwork for your salary." Isaac had waited quietly throughout the proceedings, but now he stepped forward. "Congratulations, Miss Ellison. I believe Madisonville just made a very wise decision." The pride in his voice warmed her more than it should have, considering their short acquaintance. But as Katherine shook hands with each committee member, she couldn't help glancing back at Isaac, finding his steady gaze already on her. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Katherine moved from the Golden Rose into the small but comfortable house behind the schoolhouse. The 2-room cottage had been freshly whitewashed and furnished with the basics: a bed, a table with chairs, a small sofa, a bookshelf, and a writing desk. The kitchen was tiny but functional, with a cast-iron stove and a pump for water. Women from the town arrived bearing housewarming gifts: curtains sewn by Mrs. Harper, dishes from Sarah, a quilt from the widow Carson, and various pantry staples from others. Katherine was overwhelmed by their generosity. "It's how we welcome newcomers," Sarah explained as she helped Katherine arrange her few possessions, "especially those as important as the town teacher." Isaac visited regularly, sometimes bringing fresh vegetables from his ranch garden or books for her growing collection. He helped hang the curtains, fixed a loose floorboard, and built shelves in the pantry. Each visit seemed to lengthen, their conversations ranging from literature to politics to their hopes for the future. One evening, a week before school was to begin, Isaac arrived with a small wooden crate. "What's this?" Katherine asked as he set it on her porch. Isaac grinned mysteriously. "Open it and see." Inside, Katherine found a beautiful brass bell with a wooden handle. "For the school. Every proper teacher needs a bell," Isaac said. "This one came from my mother's schoolhouse back east. I found it in the attic at the ranch and polished it up." Katherine ran her fingers over the smooth brass, touched beyond words. "Isaac, this is too precious. I can't accept something that belonged to your mother. She would have wanted you to have it," he insisted. "Education meant everything to her. She'd be pleased to know her bell was calling another generation to learning." Katherine looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. In the soft evening light, Isaac's features seemed both stronger and gentler. Without thinking, she reached up and touched his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. Isaac caught her hand, holding it against his face for a moment before slowly lowering it. His eyes never left hers. "Katherine." He began, then seemed to reconsider. I should go. You have preparations for tomorrow. Before she could respond, he had descended the porch steps and mounted his horse. I'll see you at the town picnic on Sunday, he called back, then rode away into the gathering dusk. Katherine stood watching until he disappeared, her hand still tingling where he had held it. Something was building between them, something neither had put into words yet, but that grew stronger with each meeting. The thought both thrilled and frightened her. The school term began with 43 students ranging from 6 to 17 years old. Katherine divided them into groups based on ability rather than age, creating a system where older students often helped teach younger ones, freeing her to work more closely with those who needed additional attention. The schoolhouse had 2 main rooms, a larger one for general instruction, and a smaller one that Katherine converted into specialized areas for reading, science demonstrations, and art. She established clear rules but made learning as engaging as possible, incorporating games, competitions, and practical applications into her lessons. Most of the children responded well to her methods, though a few tested boundaries at first. Jimmy Harris, a sturdy 13-year-old whose father owned a cattle operation competing with the AA, seemed particularly determined to challenge her authority. My pa says book learning won't help me run cattle, he announced defiantly during the first week when Katherine asked why he hadn't completed his arithmetic assignment. Rather than scold him publicly, Katherine nodded thoughtfully. Your father makes a valid point about practical skills, Jimmy. Tell me, how many cattle does your father run on his ranch? The boy straightened with pride. Nearly 800 head. And what do they sell for at market? Depends on weight and quality. Pa got $30 a head for last year's prime steers. Katherine walked to the chalkboard. So if your father sold, say, 50 prime steers at $30 each, and another 100 lesser quality at $25 each, how much would he earn? Jimmy frowned in concentration but didn't answer immediately. That's what arithmetic is for, Jimmy, Katherine said gently. To help ranchers know if they're making a profit, to calculate how much feed they'll need for winter, to measure pasture for rotation. I'd be happy to create problems specifically about ranching for your assignments if that would interest you more. The offer seemed to surprise the boy. You do that, of course. Learning should be relevant to your life. Katherine smiled. Perhaps you could teach me a bit about cattle ranching in return. I'm woefully ignorant about much of what happens here. This exchange marked a turning point not just with Jimmy, but with several other reluctant students. Word spread that Miss Ellison was willing to adapt her teaching to make it meaningful for each child's future, whether that meant ranching, shopkeeping, homemaking, or professional pursuits. Isaac heard about the incident from Jimmy's father at the Cattlemen's Association meeting. He recounted it to Katherine as they walked together after church the following Sunday. Harris couldn't stop talking about how you'd won his boy over, Isaac said admiringly. Said Jimmy actually did his homework without being threatened for the first time in years. Katherine laughed. I merely helped him see that learning has practical applications beyond the schoolroom. You're changing minds around here, Isaac told her. Not just the children's, but their parents too. People are talking about expanding the school term next year, maybe even hiring an assistant for you. They had reached the town square, where fall flowers bloomed in carefully tended beds. Katherine paused by a bench, her heart suddenly racing. Isaac, may I ask you something? He sat beside her, his expression open. Of course. Why have you been so kind to me? From that first day at the depot until now, you've gone out of your way to help me settle in, to make me feel welcome. Isaac looked down at his hands for a long moment. When he raised his eyes to hers again, they held an emotion Katherine had seen glimpses of before but never so clearly. At first, it was simply the right thing to do, he said quietly. You needed help and I could provide it, but then... He took a deep breath. Then I got to know you, Katherine. Your intelligence, your kindness, your determination, the way you light up when you talk about teaching, how you've embraced Madisonville and its people without judgment. He reached for her hand, holding it gently. I find myself thinking about you when we're apart. Looking forward to our next conversation, wondering what made you smile each day. Catherine's breath caught. Isaac. I know it's only been a few weeks, he continued, and I don't expect anything. Your position in the community is important and I wouldn't want to complicate that. But I wanted you to know that my feelings for you have grown far beyond simple friendship. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Katherine looked into his eyes and saw uncertainty there, as though he feared he'd said too much. I think about you too, she admitted softly. Far more than I probably should. Relief and joy spread across Isaac's face. You do? Katherine nodded, suddenly shy. When I first arrived, I thought the Barnetts' rejection was a disaster. Now I see it was actually the beginning of something wonderful. Isaac's smile could have lit the darkest night. May I call on you properly, Katherine? With your permission, I'd like to court you as you deserve. I would like that very much, she replied, her own smile matching his. As they sat together on that bench in the autumn sunshine, neither could have predicted the challenges that lay ahead, challenges that would test their budding relationship and the strength of their growing love. The following months brought changes to Madisonville and to Katherine and Isaac's relationship. Their courtship progressed with a comfortable rhythm of Sunday walks, dinners at the Golden Rose, and quiet evenings on Katherine's porch. Isaac began attending school functions, helping build new bookshelves for the growing library, and judging the science fair in December. Katherine, meanwhile, became increasingly integrated into the community. She joined the Ladies' Auxiliary, taught a reading class for adults 2 evenings a week, and even began learning to ride when Isaac gifted her a gentle mare for Christmas. She's called Penny, Isaac told her as he led the chestnut horse with a white star on her forehead to Katherine's cottage on Christmas morning. She's calm but spirited, reminded me of you. Katherine's eyes filled with tears as she stroked the mare's velvet nose. Isaac, she's beautiful but far too extravagant a gift. She was born on the AA, Isaac explained. I've been training her specially, knowing you needed to learn to ride eventually. A Texas schoolteacher can't remain earthbound forever. Their first kiss came that morning, standing beside Penny in the light snowfall that had surprised the town overnight, a gentle meeting of lips that quickly deepened into something more profound. When they finally parted, both were breathless and smiling. Merry Christmas, Katherine, Isaac whispered, his forehead resting against hers. Merry Christmas, Isaac, she replied, her heart too full for more words. January brought bitter cold and with it, challenges. A sudden blizzard stranded several children at the schoolhouse overnight. Katherine maintained calm, organizing the older students to help care for the younger ones, rationing the emergency supplies she kept on hand, and keeping everyone's spirits up with stories and games until parents could safely retrieve their children the next day. Isaac had been in Austin on business when the storm hit. When he returned to find, Katherine had handled the crisis with such competence and care, his admiration for her grew even deeper. You kept 16 children safe, fed, and unafraid during one of the worst storms in years, he marveled as they sat before the fire in her cottage afterward, his arm around her shoulders. Do you have any idea how remarkable you are? Katherine leaned against him, exhausted but content. I only did what was necessary. The children were actually quite helpful once they understood the situation. That's because they trust you, Isaac said, pressing a kiss to her temple. As they should. February saw Katherine battling a different kind of storm. Jimmy Harris's father, emboldened by whiskey after a successful cattle sale, confronted her outside the general store. "My boy's talking about wanting to study science at some university," he growled, his speech slurred. "Filling his head with nonsense when he should be learning the ranch." Katherine stood her ground despite her racing heart. "Mr. Harris, Jimmy has a remarkable aptitude for veterinary science. His essay on cattle diseases showed real insight. Don't need fancy schooling to doctor cows," Harris sneered, stepping closer. "You're ruining him with your Eastern ideas." "Step back, Harris," came Isaac's voice as he emerged from the saddlery next door. "Miss Ellison is simply doing her job and by all accounts doing it exceptionally well." Harris turned his anger toward Isaac. "This isn't your business, Adams." "Katherine is my business," Isaac replied evenly, moving to stand beside her. "And as a school board member, so is education in this town." The confrontation ended without further incident, but it highlighted the division still present in some parts of the community regarding education, particularly for those destined for agricultural work. "I don't want to cause problems between families," Katherine worried later. "Perhaps I should be more careful about encouraging ambitions that parents might not support." Isaac took her hands firmly in his. "Katherine, you're giving these children something precious, the ability to choose their own paths. Some will stay and run their family businesses, but they'll do it better for having a proper education. Others might discover talents that take them elsewhere. Either way, you're opening doors, not closing them." His unwavering support strengthened her resolve to continue challenging her students to reach their full potential, whatever form that might take. As spring approached, Katherine found herself daydreaming about her future in Madisonville. The town council had already asked her to sign a contract for the following school year, with an increased salary and budget for supplies. She had accepted without hesitation, realizing that this place had become home more quickly than she could have imagined. Her relationship with Isaac had deepened steadily. They spent every free moment together, their conversations ranging from the practical to the profound. Katherine had never felt so understood, so valued for exactly who she was. It was during the spring festival in early April that rumors began circulating about their relationship. Katherine overheard two mothers whispering as she judged the children's art display. "They say Adams is going to propose any day now," one woman murmured. "Sarah's already measuring for wedding curtains." "About time," replied the other. "They've been sweet on each other since the day she arrived." Katherine pretended not to hear, but her cheeks flushed pink. She and Isaac had not discussed marriage explicitly, though the direction of their relationship seemed clear to both of them. Still, hearing others speculate made the possibility suddenly more real and more thrilling. The festival culminated in a dance in the town square. Lanterns hung from trees, a local string band played lively tunes, and the entire community gathered to celebrate the end of winter. Katherine wore her best dress, a green cotton with white lace trim that Sarah had helped her alter to reflect the current fashion. "You look beautiful," Isaac told her when he arrived to escort her to the dance, his eyes warm with admiration. "Thank you," Katherine replied, suddenly shy under his intense gaze. "You look quite handsome yourself." And he did, in his best dark suit with a crisp white shirt and string tie. The evening progressed pleasantly, with Katherine dancing not only with Isaac but also with Judge Blackwell, Mayor Thompson, and several fathers of her students. As the night grew later, the band shifted to slower melodies. Isaac led Katherine away from the square toward the schoolyard, where the music was still audible but they had privacy. "I've been wanting to talk to you," he said, taking both her hands in his. "About us. About the future." Catherine's heart began to race. "I've been thinking about that too." Isaac smiled nervously. "Catherine, when I offered you shelter from the rain that day at the depot, I had no idea how completely you would change my life. You've brought light and learning and laughter into my world in ways I never expected." He drew a deep breath. "I love you. I think I've been falling in love with you since that first night when I found you in Sarah's kitchen, talking about teaching with such passion. I know it's only been months, not years, but I've never been more certain of anything." Catherine felt tears welling in her eyes. "I love you too, Isaac. You've shown me what it means to be truly seen and valued." Isaac reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Catherine's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my mother's," Isaac explained softly. "She always said it should go to the woman who would continue her legacy of education and strength." Kneeling before her in the soft spring grass, Isaac looked up at Katherine with all the love in his heart shining in his eyes. "Katherine Ellison, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Katherine whispered, then louder, "Yes, Isaac, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to gather her in his arms. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepened with the promise of their shared future. When they finally parted, both were smiling through tears of joy. "Mrs. Adams, the schoolteacher," Katherine said wonderingly, admiring the ring on her finger. "Mrs. Adams, the schoolteacher," Isaac confirmed, "and mistress of the AA if you're willing to split your time. The ranch house has been without a woman's touch since my mother died. It needs life and laughter again." "I would be honored," Katherine told him. "Though I don't know much about ranching," Isaac chuckled, "and I still have much to learn about literature and science. We'll teach each other." They returned to the dance hand in hand, their happiness evident to all who saw them. Sarah was the first to notice the ring, letting out a delighted cry that drew everyone's attention. Soon they were surrounded by well-wishers offering congratulations and advice. "When's the wedding?" Mayor Thompson boomed, clapping Isaac on the shoulder. Isaac looked to Katherine questioningly. "June," she replied decisively. "After the school term ends." The following weeks were filled with wedding preparations alongside end-of-term school activities. Katherine was determined to ensure her students' education didn't suffer amidst her personal happiness. She arranged final examinations, organized a display of student work for parents to view, and prepared detailed notes for whoever might take her place if the town couldn't find a permanent teacher immediately. Isaac, meanwhile, began renovations on the ranch house. He enlarged the library, knowing Catherine's love of books, and updated the kitchen with modern conveniences. He also built a small classroom in a converted storage building, where Katherine could continue teaching the ranch children and any others who lived too far from town to attend regularly. "You've thought of everything," Katherine marveled when he showed her the plans. "I want you to be happy here," Isaac replied. "I know teaching isn't just a job for you, it's a calling." Their wedding took place on a perfect June afternoon, with the entire town in attendance. The ceremony was held in the church, decorated with wildflowers gathered by Catherine's students. Sarah stood as her matron of honor, while Isaac's foreman, Michael, served as best man. Katherine wore a gown of ivory satin with lace detailing that Sarah and the ladies' auxiliary had helped create. As she walked down the aisle toward Isaac, she remembered standing alone in the rain at the depot less than a year earlier, thinking all was lost. How wrong she had been. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice carrying through the packed church. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who found each other through an act of simple kindness that blossomed into love. Their vows were traditional, but spoken with deep sincerity. When Isaac placed a simple gold band next to the engagement ring on Catherine's finger, his hands trembled slightly. When she placed a matching band on his finger, her eyes shone with unshed tears of joy. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Isaac drew Catherine into his arms for their first kiss as a married couple, heedless of the cheering congregation. In that moment, they were alone in their happiness, two hearts now bound as one. The reception was held at the Golden Rose, which Sarah had transformed with bunting, flowers, and tables laden with food contributed by nearly every family in town. There was dancing, speeches, and much laughter as the community celebrated not just a wedding but the union of two people who had each, in their own way, made Madisonville better. As evening approached, Catherine and Isaac prepared to depart for their honeymoon, a 2-week journey to San Antonio and Austin. They would stay in the finest hotels, attend the theater, visit museums, and enjoy their time as newlyweds before returning to the responsibilities of the ranch and, eventually, the school. Sarah hugged Catherine tightly before they left. "I always wanted a sister," she whispered. "Now I have one." "Thank you for welcoming me into your family," Catherine replied, equally emotional. Their departure was traditional, with rice thrown and cheers following them as Isaac helped Catherine into the waiting carriage. As they pulled away, Catherine looked back at the gathered townspeople, her students, their parents, the friends she'd made, and then at Isaac beside her, his face alight with love. "Happy?" he asked, taking her hand. "Completely," she assured him, leaning against his shoulder as Madisonville faded behind them. "Who would have thought that being rejected at the depot in the rain would lead to all this?" Isaac smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. The best journeys often begin with an unexpected turn in the road or an umbrella offered to a beautiful stranger. 5 years later, Catherine stood on the porch of the Double A ranch house, watching as Isaac taught their 4-year-old son, Thomas, to ride his pony. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly, where their second child, a daughter, according to the town's new doctor, would arrive within the month. "Mama, look," Thomas called, sitting proud and straight as Isaac led the pony around the corral. "I'm riding like Papa." "I see, sweetheart," Catherine called back, smiling at her son's delight. "You're doing wonderfully." The ranch had prospered under Isaac's management, expanding to nearly 8,000 acres. The Double A cattle were now sought after throughout Texas and beyond for their quality. Isaac had implemented innovative breeding programs and grazing rotations that Catherine had researched in agricultural journals, proving that education and practical ranching could indeed work hand in hand. Catherine had continued teaching, though in modified fashion. She still taught 3 days a week at the Madisonville school, now assisted by Miss Parker, a young woman from Dallas with excellent credentials. The other days, she taught at the ranch schoolhouse, which served not only Thomas and the children of ranch hands, but also those from neighboring properties who found the town too distant. Their partnership extended beyond family and education into community leadership. Isaac now served as president of the Cattlemen's Association and on the town council, while Catherine had helped establish a lending library for Madisonville and organized regular cultural events that brought lecturers and performers from as far away as New Orleans. Life wasn't without challenges, of course. They'd weathered droughts, market fluctuations, and a diphtheria outbreak that had claimed several lives in the county, including that of Jimmy Harris's father. Following his father's death, Jimmy, now a student at a veterinary college in Colorado, Thanks partly to a scholarship Katherine had helped him secure, had asked Isaac's advice about the family ranch. The two operations now worked in cooperation rather than competition, with Jimmy implementing scientific approaches to cattle management that benefited both properties. As Isaac and Thomas completed their riding lesson and headed toward the house, Katherine reflected on how much her life had changed since that rainy day at the depot. She had arrived with nothing but her trunk and dashed hopes, only to find everything she hadn't known she was seeking: a home, a purpose, a community, and a love that grew stronger with each passing year. "You're deep in thought, Mrs. Adams," Isaac observed as he climbed the porch steps, lifting Thomas onto his shoulders. "Just counting my blessings," Katherine replied, accepting his kiss. "And thinking about umbrellas." Isaac laughed, the sound still as warming to her heart as it had been the first time she'd heard it. "That old umbrella. I believe Sarah still has it at the boarding house." "We should get it back," Katherine said thoughtfully. "Frame it perhaps, or at least preserve it somehow. It deserves a place of honor, don't you think? As the instrument of fate that brought us together." "Absolutely," Isaac agreed. He set Thomas down and placed his hand on Katherine's belly, smiling as he felt their daughter kick. "Though I prefer to think it was more than just chance that brought you to Madisonville and me to the depot that day." "Providence," Katherine suggested. "Providence," Isaac nodded, "or perhaps simply love finding its way as it always seems to do." Thomas tugged at his father's hand. "Papa, can we have cookies now? Aunt Sarah brought some yesterday." "An excellent suggestion," Isaac told his son seriously, "but first go wash your hands." As Thomas scampered inside, Isaac drew Katherine into his arms. "I love you, Katherine Adams, more today than yesterday and not as much as tomorrow." "And I love you," she replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "My cowboy with an umbrella who changed my life with 4 simple words." "Come in," Isaac remembered, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Come in," Katherine echoed softly. "The best invitation I ever accepted." Together they entered their home, where the sound of their son's laughter mingled with the familiar creaking of floorboards and the distant lowing of cattle. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, pattering against the roof and windows, not a harbinger of desolation as it once had been for Katherine, but a reminder of beginnings, of shelter offered and accepted, of love that had grown from the simplest act of kindness on a stormy day at the Madisonville depot.